Hello, my name's Vince Cobley from the Landrover Owner Adventure Club. Most people never go off-road driving because they think they could damage their vehicle or they think it's too difficult. At Landrover Owner magazine, we try our best to assist the readers in every possible way when it comes to off-road driving. In this film, we're going to try and demonstrate to you the techniques and skills required to ensure that your off-road driving be safe and adventurous. We're going to start with the two basic four-wheel drive systems. This is how it all started, a series Land Rover. Part-time four-wheel drive, which means the rear axle's driving probably for a lot of the vehicles 90% of the time. It has the capability to push a lever which will transfer via the transfer box in the gearbox. 50% of the drive will come to the front axle, which means we now have an even 50-50 split. 50% of the drive is on the back axle, the other 50% is on the front axle. This, however, is its modern day equivalent, the Land Rover 90 Defender, permanent four-wheel drive. You don't have to think when to select the front axle, it's already selected for you. To understand the technicality of this one, however, we're going to be coming back to this vehicle a little bit later. So, when do we use four-wheel drive? For most people, as I said before, we're driving down the road in rear-wheel drive only. If we came into a site like this, if we lived in certain parts of the country where it had been snowing or that has got the capability to have snow, we may need extra traction at certain times of the year. But it's not really rough terrain. So we engage four-wheel drive in the high gearbox. As I said before, it transfers 50% of the drive to the front axle, but it does not change the overall gear ratios. However, if we came into terrain like this and then moved over onto what the sections that you can see over there that we'll be going into later on, hills, steep drops, climbs, axle articulation sections, deep mud, water, we need the capability to alter the torque figures of the vehicle and to go a little bit slower. So we have another lever that we can use. That is the low gearbox transfer lever. We do that, we have to stop the vehicle, and it changes the gear ratios within the vehicle. Third gear in the low gearbox is the equivalent gear ratio to first gear in the high box. However, a common misconception is that the word four-wheel drive means that all four wheels rotate evenly at the same time. We're now going to move this vehicle and we're going to show you that with the aid of suspension and the differential, this is wrong. Okay, now we've repositioned the Land Rover, let's try and show you what a differential does. This is the wheel. The wheel is attached to the axle. The axle has a differential, which is a load of gears really inside the axle. They distribute the drive left and right via the half shafts, but their main objective is to allow one wheel on an axle to rotate faster than the other. Ray, if you can just show us. As you can see now, we're in part-time four-wheel drive. Ray's driven away, but we're going nowhere because the differential, unfortunately, has sent the drive on the back axle to the wheel with the least resistance. If you can see, the far side wheel isn't rotating at all. It's stopped. We have got a one-wheel drive. Okay, Ray, now what we're going to show, we're going to put it into four-wheel drive. The common conception there is that all four wheels rotate evenly at the same time. Now, as you can see, we've engaged four-wheel drive, but the front wheel's not turning, and as you can see diagonally across the car, the rear wheel's not turning. We've in fact only got a two-wheel drive car, but it's the two wheels with the least resistance. Later on in the programme, we're going to try and explain to you a little bit more into that, about the terrain and about how a suspension affects that. Now, there is one problem with part-time four-wheel drive on hard surfaces. If you leave it in four-wheel drive for too long, you cause a problem that's caused transmission wind-up or gearbox wind-up. Let's go over here and I'll try and explain to you what causes transmission wind-up. Okay, as you can see in this conveniently muddy area, we just brought a vehicle through here and turned it on full lock. And as you can see, we've got four wheel marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the wheels on the right-hand side of the vehicle, the off side. These two over here are the wheels on the inside. This is the front wheel, this is the rear wheel. Front wheel, rear wheel. So as you can see, even the two wheels on the same side of the car are travelling in a different radius. But you can also see by the 4 wheel marks, these are the 2 front wheels, these are the 2 rear wheels, that the actual wheels on the back axle are actually turning a shorter corner. So let's say, for instance, that the vehicle here, that the front wheels are turning a 20-foot turning circle. The back wheels, however, are doing an 18-foot turning circle, which in reality means that the gearbox should be sending out the front prop shaft rotated at 100 revolutions, but the back one really needs to go out at 80 revolutions. But it can't do that. It's trying to distribute it out evenly. Because of the traction of a 4-wheel drive, what tends to happen is that the gearbox main shaft actually winds up. It physically starts to twist. Now, it's fine off-road if it does twist, because when you're in the mud, in the snow, a wheel will spin now and again. It will unwind itself. However, if you forget, leave wherever you've been off-roading, Welsh mountains, a quarry, if you forget about it, get onto the main road where you've got lots of grip with the weight of a 4-wheel drive, the wheels cannot unwind, they cannot contra-rotate, and eventually something shears in the transmission system. It'll be the weakest point. It could be a half shaft, or it could be the teeth and the gearing in the differential. So, be aware of that. Be aware that if the steering becomes heavy, what's causing that? Have I got a puncture? Or is my transmission wound up? Am I having problems changing gear? Is the car decelerating quicker? They're the sort of signs that you're looking for. But unfortunately, there are no visual signs as such. You can hear it sometimes. You can hear the back wheel trying to contra-rotate, trying to spin backwards to unwind itself. But earlier on, we mentioned the Land Rover Defender 90. That's a permanent 4-wheel drive vehicle. Why doesn't that get gearbox wind up? Let's go and show you now. Here we are back at the Land Rover Defender, the successor to the series Land Rover, permanent 4-wheel drive, which means the front and the back axles are permanently driven, as opposed to the series Land Rover, which only has rear-wheel drive and you have to select front-wheel drive. So if both axles are driving, why doesn't it get transmission or gearbox wind-up? It's because built into the gearbox of this model is another differential. And the differential in the gearbox works exactly the same ways as the differential on the axle. Whereas the differential on the axle distributes the drive left and right, the gearbox differential distributes the drive front and back. It allows the vehicle to turn without the shafts in the gearbox winding up. Let's try and just show you how that works. Okay, Edward, if you could just start the car, please. As you can see, we've only got 1-wheel drive. So what's happening there? Go back to the middle again. Now, what's actually happened is that the centre differential sent the drive to the axle on the vehicle with the least resistance. In this case, it's the rear axle. Then the differential on that axle has sent the drive to the wheel with the least resistance, giving us 1-wheel drive. How do we overcome that? Simple. These cars have a high and low gear lever. The high and low gear lever can be selected on the move. You simply push the lever across to the left and it locks the centre differential. That is all it does. It's a bit of a misconception because some people think it locks it all up. It doesn't. It locks the centre differential up. It automatically distributes the drive and gives you 50% drive at the front and at the back. Ed, if you'd just like to show us that, please. Let's put the gear lever across to the left. It's distributed out. As you can see now, we are back in the same mode as the series Land Rover. 1 wheel on each axle, the wheel with the least resistance. And that is the best we get with this model of vehicle. But progress. We now have come to the point where we've got rid of the part-time four-wheel drive, where we have to think about putting into four-wheel drive. They gave us permanent four-wheel drive. But people still have to think and know when to put that diff lock in. However, the new breed of vehicle has a viscous coupling gearbox. Let's try and show you how that works, because that does the thinking for you. Thanks, Ed, if you can change the vehicles. Here we are again, same place, different car. We've already talked about permanent, part-time, centre differentials. As I said before, viscous coupling. What is it? Basically a fluid drive, chain-driven, automatic lock-in centre diff. Now, you can see how the Freelander's set up now, and you've seen by the other four-wheel drives, every time we've tried to go away, we've had one-wheel drive. As you can see by this, we should get one-wheel drive. Julian, if you could just demonstrate to us what actually happens when viscous coupling takes place. And as you can see, we've got a damn near even split. It's probably actually 60-40. But what the viscous coupling is doing is, it's distributed the drive out a little bit more evenly. But the main important factor there is that it is actually ensuring that drive is staying at both axles. But as you can see from this, and as I spoke about earlier on, suspension plays a big part in off-road driving. So what we're going to try and do now is try and explain to you the different types of suspension systems that Landrover have used throughout the years. This is suspension. This is a coil spring. It could be a leaf spring, it could be a torsion bar. They all differ in the way that they adapt to the terrain. What this does is twofold. It gives you that ride comfort on the road, but with a four-wheel drive vehicle, it also ensures that the axles adapt to the terrain. This is the shock absorber. The shock absorber, exactly what it says it does. When this body, you can see this travel here, at some point, this travel has got to come back down. That ensures that it comes back down slowly. Other than that, you'd be going like you would be rocking in a Force 10 at sea. What we're going to show you now is a section of terrain to show you the different capabilities of the different types of suspension. Okay, now let's try and show you what suspension does. Just remember what I said before though. Suspension allows the wheels to keep in contact with the ground. That's what makes a four-wheel drive better off-road than any other vehicle. The first vehicle we're going to use now is Ray in the Series 2 Land Rover. It's a 2.25 petrol leaf-sprung part-time four-wheel drive. Ray's actually engaged low four-wheel drive. He's in first gear. You can still hear the revs are fairly high. That's because this engine hasn't got a lot of low-down torque. Well, it has, but it hasn't got as much as the diesels. Whoops, a daisy. If you just catch a eye of the mud on the back of that car now, you'll just notice that Ray's departure angle exceeded the car then. And as you can see now, Ray's got a slight problem there. He's actually stuck, if you look at the angle of the car, stuck going downhill. That shouldn't happen, should it really? But it's a little bit down to the suspension, okay? It hasn't got the flexibility of the coils. And you see what Ray had to do then was go a little bit faster. He's used the car's momentum, in fact, to get it through there. Now, you know, Ray is an expert at that. Some people try a little bit too much momentum and end up dropping themselves in all sorts of trouble. You see again, what he's actually doing as he's driving, he's developed something what we call ground reading skills. He's reading the ground, but he's not accelerating because he's just got to stall the car. Okay, so that's the Series 2. Let's go to its successor, the 90 Defender permanent four-wheel drive with coil spring suspension. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. So again, we put it into low gearbox. First gear, slightly just above tick over, not quite engine revving like before. Some of you may turn around and look at it and think, oh, it's got better tyres on, but they are worn, I can assure you that. So it eased it into the situation, eased it in again. Now, first thing that you may have noticed there was that we had a lot more clearance. Slightly bigger tyres, which helps, but look at the adaptability through that terrain just there. It's actually incredible. Look at it. Now, this is where Ray got stuck. Look at that, a little bit of wheel spin, but the Defender carried on through. That just shows that its suspension has actually got more adaptability. It's got more wheel travel, which keeps the wheels in contact longer with the ground. The noise that you can hear as you're picking up is just the power steering. It's actually on full lock coming round there. So if you listen to the engines, that's the main point you can hear as well. The suspension's obviously better, but listen to the engine. Just above tick over. Just applying that little bit of power when it needs it, just to climb out of the wet hills. Now, some people say that the short wheelbases are better. The 90 is actually 2 inches longer wheelbase than the Series 2 Land Rover that we just used earlier on. So a lot of people say that its ramp, breakover angles, departure angles, etc. are better. We're going to come to that shortly and show you the difference. But now we're going to move over to the 110 Defender, a longer wheelbase car. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. As before, the cars have already engaged low gearbox. You see they back off before the situation, ease right off, which helps lower the car in. As you can see, it's lowering itself in, it's not compressing, lessens the chance of any damage. Look at the back of the car though. Look how close it actually gets as opposed to the 90. That's because of the overhangs that are on the car. But look at the flexibility of the suspension. It's still working just as good. You heard a bang there, you probably saw the bang. The tow bar, that's the departure angle on the car. That's what we're going to be coming to later in the programme. But look at that, straight around that corner. Who said women can't drive like men? Okay. Now, this is its weak point here. Now you may notice here that Amanda, she may try and do it in one go. No, she's not going to. Yes, she is. I was hoping that Amanda might actually take a shunt just there. But just watch the back of the car now. Look, ooh, look at it. The front slid, the back's just slid as well. That's the side slope capability and down to traction as well. You just see there, you probably can't see there, you may do, but look at the chassis on that section just there. It came very, very close to hitting the ground. That's the car's ramp breakover. If that happens, if you land on your chassis, the back wheels or the front wheels or all four wheels can be lifted off the floor and just stuck. Okay, that's the 110 Defender. Plenty of clearances front and back. So let's try a Discovery. A lot of people think they're just used, probably 90% of them, probably used on the school run or the supermarket run. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. Again, as before with all the other ones. Now this one actually hasn't got the front spoiler on it because of the winch. And you'll see again, now we've asked Ed to do this one slightly wrong. Just watch this. This is going to get stuck in a minute. And there we go. And as you can see, Ed's purposely put this vehicle into an axle twister. The wheels diagonally across are the wheels with the least resistance. So we're stuck. Now bear that in mind, because in a moment we're going to bring up Discovery 2. Viscous coupling with traction control in exactly the same place. Let's see how that copes. But in the meantime, I'm going to get Ed to reverse and pick a slightly better route so this car goes through. This is actually what we're going to be coming to later on. Ground reading skills. You know, a good driver would have actually, from where they are now, they would be actually already assessing the terrain, looking at it, trying to read the terrain so they keep the axles level. That way, you've got equal distribution of weight and drive. 50%, that's what you're trying to do when you do it. As you can see now, Ed's actually moved the car over about 3 feet. And look at the axles. You'll see that they actually stay a lot leveler. Got an increase in possibility of approaching. And just watch the front of this winch here. the overhang, look at the approach angle, look, see, just kisses the ground. And then look at the back, look, crunch, crunch, 2 crunches. The tow bar and the rear quarter. Now, if Ed had been travelling faster over that terrain, we'd have got more body sway. It could have hit us even harder, and we could have been looking at parts of the Discovery sitting in the ground just here then. As you can see though, it's still tackling the terrain, and if you're listening to it, listen to that engine. It's just chugging away. That 300 TDI develops something like 160 pound-feet torque at 1750 revs, 1750 revs. Some cars have to get up to about 3000 to develop that sort of torque. That's what gives these cars the ability to go slow. And as a first-time off-road driver, this is what you've got to train yourself to do. You've got to slow down, you've got to lower the gears, and you've got to keep those revs down. And it will help you read the terrain, and it will help you steer a lot more controllably as well. As you saw just then, Ed actually took a little shunt then, again, purely to set the car up, possibly to reduce the damage, but it also gave him a better line through there. You can see there, look how the suspension's working, but at no point in either of the coil, the Defender 90 with the coils, the Discovery, has a wheel come off the ground or lost traction, just like the series motor. But you can see, you may notice as we're going through here, the tow bar gets close, but the sills are actually getting very, very close. This is still ramp breakover angle. Again, there's a misconception that the ramp breakover angle is when the chassis lands. It's not. Look at the sill just then. Look how close it came to hitting the ground. Now, Ed's going to change vehicles now, and he's going to come through this section that we just got stuck a few moments ago, but we're going to come through with Discovery 2. TD5 Discovery with a viscous coupling, centre differential, and traction control. What is traction control? Traction control is, as you saw then, Edward was stuck, so the wheel was spinning. Traction control is the ABS computer. What it does, it senses the wheels spinning, and it applies the brakes to the wheels that are spinning. It tries to fool that differential to send the drive to the other wheel. And I think now you'll see a very vivid demonstration of how that works. Please bear in mind, what we're actually showing you now is a demonstration. This is technically how you shouldn't drive off-road. As you can see, he's lining it up totally wrong, because you can see from the ground here, it's an axle twister. You've only got to look at the holes. How were they caused? Now, watch this. He comes into it, he applies a bit of revs, and it drives. Now watch this, look. Bit of revs, up it goes, look at that. Even with that wheel off the floor, that car drives through there, not a problem at all. And he was controlling that by the accelerator. If you sit there on tick over, it doesn't quite work. You just have to apply the revs, and you apply the revs gently. And you saw how dramatic that is. It can be very unnerving sometimes. Now see, look, even there where Ray had a problem, he just had to apply the accelerator and off it went. Because what you've got to bear in mind, that these cars have actually got anti-roll bars on. They stiffen the ride on the road. They actually reduce that body roll. You can go around corners faster. But because of that, they also lessen the travel off-road. But the traction control compensates it for it. It can be a problem though, because it puts the inexperienced driver in situations where they shouldn't be. Obviously with these cars now, you may be looking at the front of it and you may be picking up the bits of mud that are spattered on the front and the sills. Watch the back end, look as it goes down there, look, so close to hitting the back. If that had a tow bar on it, that would have hit that back of that car. And actually, I would prefer a tow bar on a car like this, because the tow bar is going to take the impact before the bodywork does. It's a lot cheaper way of doing it. Okay, so far we've covered leaf and coil. How about the new Freelander? How about torsion bar suspension with no low gearbox? Let's see how that copes with this terrain. Now this is an ex-Camel Trophy Freelander. Although it's got a fancy paint job and lots of bits and bobs on it, the transmission is still the same as your family Freelander that you would drive at home. Now, as you can see, it's actually taken slightly now. Listen to this, look at it. Listen to all that noise. Look at the speed he's having to go around here to get around this course. But he's still doing it. But it's a lot more violent. Look at that, look, wheels off the floor, body crashing down. If that was your pride and joy, you would have stopped just here because you would have heard that first crash and thought, oh my God, the old man would now be shouting at you, the kids would be screaming, and you'd be petrified that you'd damaged your pride and joy. But it just proves that this car does it. A lot of people don't think it can. But look how it's going around this course. There, it's all protected though. It sounds horrible. And that's one of the things when you're off-road driving, you've got to train yourself. Some of the noises, because they vibrate through the chassis, sound terrible. But 9 times out of 10, the Landrover mechanics and everything, the designers have actually took everything up out of the way, and it's all superficial bangs. So, how about that? That shows you how suspension works. Ground familiarisation skills. What does it mean? It's the driver's ability to look at the terrain in front of him, to set up the car, whether it be the gear, the speed, or the angle of approach. Let's have a look at the ground clearances of the four-wheel drives. The first one that we've got coming through is Ray in the Series 2. The lowest point of the car is the differential. As you can see, look how close it's getting, but also his springs are actually getting fairly close to the ground as well. Now the main point of that is that if the differential actually caught on the ground, or the ruts were too deep, it would lift the front of the car off the floor. He would lose traction. See, look, the 110, same size wheels, same sort of distance. Now, look at the Discovery coming through. It's a lot lower. Look how it's struggling. Look at the front spoiler. Look how it's designed. It's dug away to take a little bit. That's actually quite close again. You could damage the front of your car if you got that wrong. Now, let's have a look at the Freelander, the lowest of them all, plus torsion bar suspension. Still copes admirably with the terrain down there, but look how close it is. The skid guard all the way through. That's an aftermarket add-on, by the way. If you actually look back at the terrain now, you can make out the marks in the ground. Okay, that's one clearance, that's ground clearance. Now let's go and have a look at the other three: approach, ramp breakover and departure angle. Okay, we've just showed you one type of ground clearance. We're going to show you another one now. It's called the ramp breakover angle, and it's the car's ability to come up and go over a hill without hitting the chassis or the side of the car on the ground. So you can see now Ed's feeding the car in very carefully, watching out for other angles that we're going to come to in a moment. As he feeds it over, look how close the car starts to get. And look at that. As you can see now, the chassis is actually just touching the ground. The side seals of the car are touching the ground. Any more extreme, we could do serious damage to the car. But also as well, if you came over there a little bit too fast, as the car actually crests and goes over to the side, the engine can compress the suspension, squab the tyres, lessening that ground clearance and really smashing up onto that sill. Okay, Ed, if you'd like to take it off the hill. So that's it. That's the ramp breakover angle. Be very careful of that. Sometimes it's the little innocuous looking hills that can actually just get you sitting onto the ground or four-wheel spinning and you're stuck. Now we're going to move over to approach and departure angles and see how relevant they are in off-road driving skills. Another two challenges for you and your vehicle: the approach and the departure angle. What are they? Where are they taken from? The approach angle is taken from the bottom of the wheel to the lowest protruding point at the front of the car. It's the car's ability to go in and up a hill without impacting that low point. It can be very expensive. Let's just see it in action. Okay, Ray? You can see he's going into it very slowly. Look at the car, just clearing. And he stops. Just remember, this is a set situation. Accelerate into that a little bit faster could have your suspension compressing and altering those angles and clearances. Now I mentioned another angle, the departure angle. What's that one? Same again, it's taken from the back of the wheel at the bottom to the lowest overhanging point at the rear of the vehicle. As you can see from this, it could be a very expensive mistake to make. The whole back of the car could be crumpled up. A very big dent in your credit card and your wallet. Now we're going to show you another demonstration using a different vehicle with different approach and departure angles. we are again with a different vehicle, a 110 Defender. As you can see, if you excluded the roller fair lead on the front, this has got one hell of an approach angle, which means it can actually go up steeper hills. Let's just see that in action. Okay, Amanda, if you could show us, please. You can see, look, inches of room on the front there. But what was that noise? What was that extra resistance? The departure angle has been fouled by the overhanging tow bar. The one good thing, though, about having a tow bar on the car is it actually protects the panel work. As you can see here, the rear bodywork of the Defender is actually well off the ground. The tow bar has taken all of the impact. So it may be something worthwhile remembering. Put something on the car to protect those vulnerable points. Now we're going to show you a few more skills associated with off-road driving.